They say success is meant to be celebrated, that every milestone deserves applause, every victory a moment of pride. But what happens when the applause never comes, even from within? There is a quiet pattern, rarely spoken about. People who achieve but feel nothing. People who reach the top of something they once wanted and immediately move the finish line. Is it humility or something deeper? Is it discipline or a silent inability to feel worthy? Beneath the surface, there exists a hidden psychology, one shaped not by success but by absence. The absence of permission, the absence of emotional safety. This is not about ambition. It is about disconnection. Let's begin. There is a moment, right after something good happens. A result comes in, a goal is reached, a difficult task is completed, and for a second, just a second, something almost rises within you. A flicker, a quiet sense that maybe this matters, but then, just as quickly, it disappears. It wasn't that big. Anyone could have done it. It could have been better. The moment closes, not with celebration, but with dismissal. This is where the pattern begins to reveal itself. Because for some people, success does not feel like an arrival. It feels like something to reduce, to shrink, to move past as quickly as possible. And over time, this becomes automatic. You stop pausing. You stop acknowledging. You stop feeling. Achievements become checkpoints, not experiences. Things to get through, rather than moments to hold. But why? Why does something objectively positive feel so emotionally neutral? Why does recognition feel uncomfortable, even when it is deserved? Part of the answer lies in comparison. There is always something bigger, someone better, a higher version of what could have been done. So the mind adjusts the scale. What once felt meaningful now feels small. And slowly, nothing feels enough to justify celebration. But beneath comparison, there is something quieter, a subtle discomfort with attention, a tendency to redirect the focus away from yourself. Because celebration requires something that feels unfamiliar, acknowledgement. And acknowledgement, for some, feels exposed. It feels like standing in a light that was never fully safe. So instead, the mind protects itself by minimizing, by downplaying, by turning something significant into something ordinary, not as a conscious choice, but as a learned reflex. You might notice it in the way you respond to compliments, the way you quickly deflect them, the way you explain away your own effort, almost as if accepting it would mean crossing a line. But what line? The truth is, this dismissal is not about the achievement itself. It is about what that achievement represents. Visibility, worth, recognition, and somewhere along the way, those things became complicated. So instead of celebrating, you move on, quietly, efficiently, always forward, never pausing long enough to feel what just happened. And the result is subtle but powerful. A life filled with progress, but strangely empty of moments that feel like they belong to you. Because nothing is ever allowed to stay long enough to be felt. Patterns like this do not appear suddenly. They are not random habits that form without reason. They begin quietly, in places where emotions were shaped long before they were understood. For some, it starts in environments where success was expected, but rarely acknowledged. You did well. So what? That was the standard. There was no pause, no warmth, no moment of being seen. And slowly, something begins to form in the background. The idea that achievement is not something to feel, only something to maintain. In other cases, recognition existed, but it came with conditions. Praise was given, but only when it served a purpose, only when it met a certain level, only when it aligned with someone else's expectations. So the mind learns something subtle, that success is not personal. It is transactional. It belongs to others, to their approval, to their standards, and without that external signal, it feels incomplete. There are also environments where attention itself felt uncomfortable, where being noticed meant pressure, or judgment, or comparison, where standing out did not feel safe, but risky. In those spaces, celebration becomes associated with exposure, not joy, but vulnerability. So the safest response becomes invisibility. Even in moments of success, you achieve, but you stay quiet about it. You move forward, but you do not look back. Because looking back would mean acknowledging something that once felt dangerous. And then there are the more subtle beginnings, moments where emotions were simply not mirrored. A child shares something they are proud of, but the response is neutral, distracted, absent. No harm intended, but no emotional reflection either. So the moment passes without landing, and over time the mind adapts. It stops expecting a response. It stops creating meaning around achievement, because meaning was never reinforced. So success becomes just another event, something that happens, but does not stay. What makes this pattern difficult to notice is how normal it feels. It does not feel like something is missing. It feels like this is just how things are. Achievements come and go. Life moves forward. No need to pause. But underneath that normalcy, there is an absence, not of success, but of emotional connection to it. And that absence is not a flaw. It is a reflection of environments where celebration was never fully safe or never fully taught. So the mind did what it always does. It adapted, not to feel more, but to feel less. What feels like a personality trait often has roots in something far more mechanical, because the mind does not only respond to experiences, it learns from them, quietly, repeatedly, precisely. Every time something happens, the brain asks a simple question: was this rewarding? And if the answer is unclear or absent, the system adjusts. For some people, achievement never becomes strongly linked with reward. The moment happens, but the internal signal does not fully register. There is no emotional reinforcement, no lasting imprint that says, "This matters." So the brain moves on. This is where conditioning begins to shape perception. Over time, the mind becomes more focused on what is next than on what has already been done. Not because it is driven, but because it has learned that the present moment holds no emotional return. And without reward, there is nothing to anchor the experience. It simply passes through. There is also the role of anticipation. In many cases, the mind becomes more stimulated by the idea of achieving than by the achievement itself. The build-up creates tension, focus, energy. But once the goal is reached, that tension disappears. And instead of relief, there is emptiness, because the system was not trained to feel after, only to chase before. This creates a subtle loop. You move towards something, you reach it, and then nothing stays. So the mind quickly searches for the next target, not out of passion, but out of necessity, to recreate the only part that feels alive, the pursuit. There is also a cognitive pattern at play, a tendency to focus on gaps rather than completions. What is missing? What could have been better? What still needs to be done? This is not always conscious. It feels like awareness, like improvement, like realism, but it quietly overrides something essential: recognition, because the brain begins filtering out completion as irrelevant and amplifying imperfection as important. So even in moments of success, attention shifts elsewhere, and what remains is a sense that nothing is ever fully done or fully enough. From the outside, this can look like discipline, like high standards, like constant growth. But internally, it feels different. It feels like never arriving, like standing at the end of something and already feeling pulled away from it before it can even be felt. And the longer this pattern continues, the more natural it becomes, until eventually celebration feels unfamiliar. Not because it is unnecessary, but because the brain was never taught how to stay with it. So it keeps moving, forward, always forward, leaving every achievement behind before it ever becomes real. Even when the moment is there, even when something objectively meaningful has been achieved, there is a quiet resistance that rises from within. Not loud, not obvious, but present. A hesitation to fully step into the experience. Because celebration, for some, does not feel natural. It feels uncomfortable, almost like wearing something that doesn't belong to you. You might notice it in subtle ways. A compliment is given, and instead of landing, it is redirected. It wasn't a big deal. I just got lucky. It could have been better. The words come quickly, almost automatically, not to be polite, but to restore a sense of familiarity. Because accepting recognition creates tension. And that tension comes from something deeper than modesty. It comes from exposure. To acknowledge your achievement is to allow yourself to be seen. And being seen for some carries a history of judgment, of comparison, of expectations that followed attention like a shadow. So the mind develops a quiet defense. If you do not fully accept the moment, you cannot fully be held accountable for it either. If you minimize it, you stay in control, because celebration opens a door to visibility, to expectation, to the possibility that now, something more will be required. And that possibility feels heavy. So instead, the safer path is chosen. Downplay, deflect, move on. There is also another layer. Guilt. A subtle feeling that acknowledging your success might take something away from others. That it might appear arrogant, or insensitive, or undeserved. So you shrink the moment before anyone else can, keeping everything balanced, quiet, unnoticed. But beneath all of this, there is a deeper question. What does it mean to truly accept something good about yourself? For some, this question feels unfamiliar, because self-recognition was never practiced. It was either discouraged or simply absent. So when the moment comes, there is no internal structure to hold it, no place for it to land, only resistance, a quiet push away from something that feels too exposed, too uncertain. So instead of expanding into the moment, you contract, you make it smaller, safer, and then you leave it behind. Not because it wasn't meaningful, but because staying with it would require something unfamiliar, allowing yourself to exist in the light without immediately stepping out of it. And for a mind that learned to stay in the background, that can feel like the hardest thing of all. At some point, something begins to feel off. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, persistently. You achieve something you once wanted, something that once felt distant, and instead of fulfillment, there is a brief pause followed by movement. On to the next thing. First, it feels productive, like momentum, like growth. But over time, a pattern starts to emerge. Nothing ever feels like enough. Not because the achievements are small, but because the feeling never stays. It slips through too quickly, like trying to hold water in your hands. You reach, you hold, and before you can even register it, it's gone. So you adjust. Maybe the goal needs to be bigger, more significant, more undeniable, something that will finally feel real. But when that moment comes, the same thing happens again. A flicker, a pause, and then nothing, followed by the quiet urge to move forward. This is where the realization begins to surface. The issue is not the size of the achievement. It is the relationship with it, because the horizon keeps moving, not in the world, but in the mind. There is always another level, another version, another standard just out of reach. And chasing it starts to feel less like ambition and more like escape. Escape from something that is harder to face. Stillness, because stillness requires reflection. And reflection brings awareness. Awareness of how much has been done and how little of it was ever truly felt. There is a quiet exhaustion in this realization. Not physical, but emotional. A sense of constantly moving without ever arriving. And the more this pattern continues, the more distant satisfaction begins to feel. Not because it doesn't exist, but because it was never allowed to settle. You begin to notice moments that should have meant something. Moments that passed without weight. and a question starts to form. What would it feel like to actually stay? To not rush past the finish line, but to sit with it, to let it register, to allow something to be enough, even if just for a moment. This question does not come with an immediate answer, but it marks something important, a shift from unconscious movement to quiet awareness, because once you see the horizon moving, you cannot unsee it, and somewhere within that awareness, a different possibility begins to emerge, not about achieving more, but about finally feeling what has already been achieved. Awareness does not change the pattern immediately, simply slows it down. For the first time, there is a pause between achievement and dismissal, a small space, and in that space, something unfamiliar begins to surface. Not celebration, not pride, just presence. Because for someone who has spent years moving past their own moments, even staying for a few seconds can feel different, almost uncomfortable. The instinct is still there, to minimize, to redirect, to move forward. But now there is also recognition of that instinct. And that recognition creates a choice, not a forced one, not a dramatic one, just a quiet possibility, to stay a little longer than usual, to notice what happened without immediately changing its meaning. This is where the process begins, not by learning how to celebrate, but by learning how to feel, because celebration in its simplest form is not about expression. It is about acknowledgement, an internal moment where something is allowed to exist, without being reduced, without being compared, without being pushed aside. At first, this can feel unfamiliar, even unnecessary. The mind might question it. What's the point? Why does this matter? Because it was never taught that it does. But something subtle begins to shift. The more you stay with a moment, the more it starts to register, not as something extraordinary, but as something real, a completed effort, a finished experience, something that belongs to you, even if only quietly. There is no need for grand gestures, no need for external validation, just a gradual rebuilding of connection between action and emotional recognition. And over time, that connection becomes more natural. The gap between achieving and feeling becomes smaller, not completely gone, but softer, less automatic. You might notice small changes, a compliment that lingers a second longer, a moment of completion that feels slightly heavier, in a good way, not overwhelming, not intense, just present. And that presence carries something new, not pressure, not expectation, but permission. Permission to exist within your own experiences, without immediately stepping out of them. This is not about becoming someone who celebrates everything. It is about no longer abandoning your own moments. Because when something is finally allowed to stay, it begins to leave a trace, a quiet imprint that says, this happened, and it mattered, even if only to you. There is a quiet shift that happens, not all at once, but gradually. Moments begin to feel different, not louder, not more intense, just more present. An achievement happens, and for a brief time it stays, not as something to prove, not as something to measure, but simply as something that exists. And within that presence, something deeper begins to unfold. A realization that was never loud enough to be noticed before. That worth was never meant to be chased through outcomes. It was never hidden inside milestones, never waiting at the end of a goal. It was always there, quietly existing beneath the movement. But the constant need to move forward made it difficult to see, because when every moment is treated as a stepping stone, nothing is ever allowed to feel like ground. And without ground, there is nothing to stand on. So the search continues. Not for success, but for a feeling that success was never designed to give. And this is where something begins to settle. Not a solution, not a final answer, just a softer understanding that maybe the absence of celebration was never a flaw, but a pattern shaped by experiences that taught the mind to move instead of stay, to achieve instead of feel. And when that pattern is seen, it begins to lose some of its weight, because it no longer feels like identity. It feels like something that was learned, and what is learned can slowly be unlearned, not by force, not by expectation, but by allowing moments to exist, without immediately leaving them behind. There is no need to become someone different, no need to transform into a version that celebrates everything loudly, because worth does not require performance. It does not need to be expressed perfectly, or felt intensely, or proven repeatedly. Sometimes it exists in the quietest form, in a moment that is simply acknowledged and allowed to stay, even briefly, and that is enough. Not in a final sense, but in a real one, a grounded one, because for the first time, something is not being chased. It is being experienced, and that changes everything, without needing to change anything at all. If something in this felt familiar, if parts of this reflection echoed experiences that were never fully spoken, then what you've been carrying is not as uncommon as it may have seemed. There are many who move forward quietly, who achieve without ever pausing to feel it, who continue not because they are never enough, but because something inside them never learned how to stay. And there is nothing broken in that, only something that adapted, something that learned to protect, to minimize, to keep moving, in environments where stillness did not always feel safe. So if you find yourself in that pattern, gently noticing it, even for a moment, is already something meaningful. If you'd like to stay connected to reflections like this space will continue to explore the quieter, often unseen parts of the human experience, the places that are rarely spoken about, but deeply felt. And if you ever feel like sharing your thoughts, know that it is always optional, but your words might help someone else feel a little less alone in their own silence. Take care of yourself. You deserve gentleness.